Good afternoon. I am so delighted to welcome so many people to this concert of gratitude for Ted Phillips, who lived his life among us for 20 years here at St. John's. I am so delighted that so many people would come from so many different churches. He really seemed to have quite a lovely set of relationships in the AGO, and I'm delighted that the American Guild of Organists would come out in such good force here today. I'm seeing people from St. Stephen's, Schenectady, and St. George's, Schenectady, and St. Paul's, Albany, and of course from us and from St. Peter's, and it's just lovely, lovely that you would all come. I'm going to hand this over first to Wayne Palka. Wayne is a very good friend of Ted. They work together, and he has been the one who has worked behind the scenes in order for us to move forward with a funeral for Ted. And so I'm going to go ahead and ask him to come up, and then I'll be coming back up in a moment.
Hi, everybody. So just wanted to start off saying that, since I'm not a member of the congregation, people might be wondering, exactly what Ted and my relationship was. And Ted transferred up here from Florida. We all worked for Xerox Corporation. And he came up, and through the years, I started off being his coworker, went to kind of being his student. Then I became a manager, and then I became his boss. And somewhere in there, we somehow became friends. I'm not quite sure how that happened. But, Ted has been a big part of my life for a good 20 years. And, again, I've got quite a few Ted stories, but I thought I'd just try to hit a couple that really pertain to St. John's. The first one was when he probably had just started playing for you. He kept asking me to come to services. And, we had our own church to go to, my wife and I, so it just didn't get down here. And then he arranged, at least he says he arranged, the Mardi Gras Mass, or Mardi Gras service. And he knew that I was interested in music and different types of music. And I get down here and I find that the Mardi Gras band were all Xerox employees. He managed to tie work and music together with worship, which I thought was classic Ted. Let's have 17 connections and tell nobody nothing. like to keep secrets. But, and of course, that was a tradition that went on here for some time. And the St. John's connection just continued because we live in Wynantskill, and Ted would come to the house on occasion for holidays and whatever. And he's over at the house, I can't remember the occasion, and he just looks at me and he goes, "What's Tiffany's card doing next door?" And I said, "How do you know Tiffany?" And it turned out that Tiffany and Adam had bought the house next to us. So we wound up having a little, again, St. John's cross communication. So it just seems like it was fate that we kept crossing paths with Ted and St. John's together. Let me just look quick at the notes. One of the key things that I wanted to say, though, was in private, Ted could not have been prouder, and especially for Ted, more effusive about his role at the church. As a matter of fact, recently, as he became ill, his biggest concern is that he was letting people down. And I tried to tell him that you're doing a yeoman's job hanging in here as long as you have. And I'm sure that the people at the church are grateful and they're thankful that you've been able to contribute as much as you have through the years. And I'll just end with one last thing. I just think this is kind of a fun anecdote with Ted, especially regarding the music. He didn't dress very flashy. He used to dress on occasion. He'd wear a t-shirt with a message on it. And he had this one t-shirt that he wore around for quite a while that I'm going to get this slightly wrong, but it's supposedly a quote from Schweitzer. And it said that God's greatest gifts to man were cats and music. And if anybody knows Ted, that's true. But I know Ted would thank you all for coming and for supporting his efforts and his memory. Thank you.
I will also say that funeral plans really are coming along. And so however you found out about this, I trust you will find out about that. It should be in the next couple of weeks. We're finally being able to move ahead with the funeral director. So I had a couple of thoughts that I wanted to share here that seem particularly apropos, and then, of course, we will share more at the funeral. Now, whenever Deacon Paul would greet Ted on a Sunday morning, he would say, "Yo, teddy bear." And that always kind of filled my heart, and it was always very apt for Ted. I think we chose the furriest picture that we had for the front of our bulletin here. And he has that really playful look about him in this picture. So for me, it is my favorite picture of Ted. Now, I was fond of Ted and admired him on many fronts. He knew organs, but especially he knew this organ. He knew how to play around its limitations. And when we had what David Hunn, our head of properties, called the plaster disaster of 2023, and huge chunks of plaster fell into the great section of the organ, bending pipes and knocking them out of their wind chests, clogging them up with chunks of plaster and plaster dust. And I would say to an organist, I'd say, "Did you hear about what happened to our organ?" And they'd say, "We saw the pictures." Like this really went around the organist community. It was so jaw-dropping. And Ted played around those limitations. Ted's heart was in hymnody. He would play 10 hymns at the Lessons and Carols service, and you have a different registration for each of those verses. When the lyrics mentioned a trumpet, you'd hear the trumpet. And if you thought a particular set of words were important in a particular verse, he would detach them a little, so we would pay attention. And every time I heard that, I'd look at those words and I'd say, yeah, I can see why he did that. And he would do this because Ted was, in addition to being an organist, he was very theologically committed. He was really committed to God in Christ Jesus. He loved reading the final reading of Lessons and Carols. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the Word became flesh and dwelled among us. He always wanted to do that reading. Now, during Lent, the parish would write a Lenten devotional. It was a set of reflections of daily scripture, usually around a particular characteristic. And the first year we did this, we chose the passages that were unique to Luke. And so Ted chose a passage, wrote very competently and pastorally about that passage, and then asked, "Well, do you need me to reflect on something more?" And I said, "Yeah, we have some more passages." And I said, "How about the dishonest steward?" And he said, "Sure." Now, that's a very theologically difficult passage, and he wrote really competently on it again, and then he asked for another passage. He was a quietly generous person, and he rarely had a conversation with me in which he didn't ask, "How's your discretionary fund?" or "How are they doing at the food pantry?" He he would give computers to graduating neighbors and students of the parish, and he was just always very quietly generous. I know that you won't like me telling people this, but that was true. And the last memory of Ted pivots toward Daniel Romero. And that was, we had an organ crawl here this past spring, and it was right after the plaster disaster had been repaired. And he was the host, of course, for our organ. So he demonstrated the organ, its various stops, its various divisions. He played something. And then he said, so, would anyone else like to play? Now, of course, Daniel was sort of the new phenomenon in town. And all eyes turned to Daniel. Oh, Daniel, you play. Like all the organists really wanted to hear Daniel play. And so he took his place at the console, looked at it. That's all he did. And then he pulled out some stops, and then off he went. And it was wonderful. And so as we come to this, I want to hand over the organ in the same way that Ted handed the organ over to you that day, and hand over the program. And thank you so very, very much for leading us in this wonderful celebration of Ted.
Thank you all so much. It's an honor to be here, to be in this program, to honor Ted, to play this fabulous Aeolian Skinner organ, which I absolutely adore. Yes, she needs a little bit of repair, but boy, has she got a lovely voice, and I love it. And you're going to hear some more of the color on this next piece by Herbert Howells. We get to see some of the softer tones of this, which Aeolian Skinner did so well and in such a lovely way. The expressive nature of this instrument, to go from loud to soft, is a wonderful aspect of it and something that I love. Not just the tone color, but the ability to go from very loud to quite a whisper. So we get to hear some of the quieter sounds this time around. The Whitlock, which I just played, a wonderful mid-20th century composer that is known by organists, but is perhaps not as well known as he ought to be in other ways, demonstrates a lot of this wonderful tonality and expression that was common in Anglican church music and organ music in the mid-20th century, and it fits here very well. Now we get a little bit more of that with Herbert Howells. Herbert Howells wrote 6 psalm preludes. They're based on verses of psalms, and I've given you the one that this one is based on. It seems very appropriate for this occasion, and he paints this text very well. I just love it when the organ can go down to an absolute whisper like that. In the students that I teach, and I remember this as a child beginning the organ, we want to see how loud the organ can possibly go, and louder and louder. Over the years, I have come to love the quiet stuff. And so many of the instruments I play nowadays just can't get quiet enough like that moment. And I love that. It's a wonderful thing that we forget about these days quite a bit. I'd like to welcome Sabrina Mana up to sing. This piece I love, and you all know this piece, I know. But since we're paying tribute and remembering Ted, I figured this would be a lovely thing here. I also welcome Emerson Fang, who's going to play violin on part of this as well, the famous Pie Jesu from the Fauré Requiem. we had some discussion with him about this program, which initially was to honor his retirement from here, about what he might like to hear on it. And César Franck chorales came up. And I thought, well, that's a great thing. So chorale in A minor by César Franck. Franck was considered by many to be the founder of the French Romantic school of organ playing in the 1800s and in Paris, and very influential over all of the music of that time and for organists today. The three chorales were the last pieces that he wrote, and he never ever got to completely edit them because he finished them while on his deathbed. And so we have to fill in some gaps about some information. He gave us all the notes, and he gave us most of the registrations, but a few little pieces we have to fill in. Nonetheless, it's still an amazing work, and it's great to be able to include it here today and to include one of Ted's favorite composers. Now, a quieter piece from the premier composer for the organ, J.S. Bach. One of the many chorale preludes he wrote, a chorale prelude being a piece of organ music that's based on a hymn tune, or in this case, a Lutheran chorale. I think the page number of this hymn in our hymnal made it into your bulletin. I put that there because you can see the words. The words, of course, in our hymnal are a paraphrase, a translation of whatever the original German was. But Bach was very much informed by the texts of the chorales, and he tried to interpret them in the music. And this one is no different. This is a Eucharistic hymn, it's a communion hymn, and he portrays that very nicely. And it's one of my favorites, one of Felix Mendelssohn's favorites, who we'll talk about him a little bit later. And composers and organists and audiences have loved this one because it's so lovely. But it also gives us a nice respite for the ears after bombastic Franck. So, Schmuckedik by Bach. I'm happy to welcome Emerson Fang back with his violin. Ornament of Grace was commissioned by the American Guild of Organists some years ago, I think probably about 15 years ago, for one of the big events that the American Guild of Organists had on a national scale. And they heavily encouraged local chapters to perform this piece as part of a bigger event. It's a lovely piece, and I love music written specifically for organ and other instruments. It's fun to show the organ as not only an accompanying instrument, but also as a duet instrument, a trio instrument, an ensemble instrument. We so often in our week-to-week church doings only hear the organ as a solo instrument or as accompanying hymns and choir. So it's nice to include instruments. Bernard Wayne Sanders is from Wisconsin, but now he lives and works in Germany. And he is still a very prolific composer, writing lots and lots of things. To the organists who are here present, I commend this piece, but also his many chorale preludes. He writes very nice chorale preludes on a variety of hymn tunes. But now, Ornament of Grace. Felix Mendelssohn was the first major composer after Bach to seriously address the organ, to write serious organ music. In the period of Mozart and Beethoven, string and orchestra became the primary instruments that composers were interested in. The organ didn't really develop much during those years and basically stayed as the late Baroque instruments. But come the 19th century, that was about to change. Mendelssohn was a celebrity in Great Britain, of all places. He made 9 trips to Great Britain over his short life, and that is the one place where he was a celebrity as an organist. In Germany, he was known as a pianist and a composer, but in Germany, he had no need to become a very good organist because he didn't need the money, and there were many other organists in Germany who were far better than him anyway. So he only kind of played around at it at the side, but he got pretty good at it over time. So good that he was instrumental in reviving the works of J.S. Bach that had flown into obscurity and gave a recital of some of Bach's very major, very difficult organ works. And so, because of his British connections, Mendelssohn was commissioned to write the 6 organ sonatas. Coventry and Hollier commissioned him to write the pieces. They asked him if he'd write a set of voluntaries. Mendelssohn did his research. He couldn't figure out what a voluntary was. So he suggested organ sonatas instead, and they agreed. And thus, the organ sonata, in many ways, a brand new genre for the organ, was born. Mendelssohn, in the preface to these, says, "Of all the organs I have played, I cannot find one that is like the other." So he gives instructions to follow the dynamics for your stops rather than giving specific stops. Because of all these factors and because of his British connections, which I can go into in much greater detail, but I will spare you from, Mendelssohn wrote organ pieces that can be played on almost any instrument, from the late Baroque organs to the emerging Romantic Victorian organ that was starting to be built in England at the time, at the end of his life. And so they're very versatile works, they're wonderful. I think Mendelssohn is very much a romantic, and so I interpret him as a romantic in these pieces. And the Aeolian Skinner organ gives us, especially on the quiet movements, some interesting dynamic and color possibilities, which I look forward to sharing with you. Sonata 1 in F minor by Felix Mendelssohn. As much of a finale as that was, we have one more, and we all get to make a little bit of music together. Choir, if you would come forward now at this time, that would be lovely. We are, throughout this whole process, or early on in this process, Al Fedak was commissioned to write a lovely arrangement of Ted's favorite hymn, which is He Who Would Valiant Be, to the hymn tune St. Dunstan's. This is a hymn anthem thing, so congregation, please join us in singing that. You sing verse 1 and verse 3. The choir will do the second verse by themselves. This is a lovely arrangement, and it's an honor to get to premiere this here today. I'm sorry that Ted doesn't get to hear this in person, but I am certain that he gets to hear it anyway.
want to thank everyone for coming. Especially I want to thank our wonderful artists. I want to take a moment to acknowledge Al Fedak, who's here with us. Could you please stand up? I want to thank especially our fabulous choir. My gosh, you pulled that together very quickly. It was very impressive. Beautiful, beautiful job. I want to thank Sabrina and Emerson, wonderful artists here today. And I, of course, want to especially thank Daniel Romero for this amazingly conceived and executed concert. Thank you so much. Our wonderful hospitality committee has prepared our culinary artists, they're artists as well, has prepared a reception for us. If you go back through this room, take a look at the ceiling, it's been recently redone, and come through the hallways, down the hall, into the gym. So you'll follow the natives and you'll find your way there. Again, I cannot thank you all enough for coming to honor our wonderful Ted Phillips.